here at Be Strong Families. Hi, Ashley from Nashville. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I have 5 acres of land for less than the amount that I was paying in my apartment in Evanston. I just like blows me away. Um, and it's a big house, and you're all welcome to come visit. So if you're coming anywhere near Chicago, I'm halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee, and all are welcome. I'm kind of outfitting my new house as like a retreat center, as a bed and breakfast kind of a place. So you're all welcome. And if you're coming, I'm seriously, email me and let me know. And I would love to see you. I consider you guys all my friends. We've been at this for a year, and I consider us close. Hi, Sandra. Welcome. Welcome. Well, you're going to get vaccinated soon, Tammy, right? All right. Well, it's 12 o'clock, and Andrew's here and back. He's our support for today. Very grateful for that. And today's topic is the year in review. It's basically we're looking at what happened over the past year with the webinars. And um, I'm just really happy to have, I'm really delighted to have you all here, because we're also going to do a sneak peek to what and about what's next. And that means that you'll be able to have a little bit of input before it starts. So kind of treating you all as a focus group as well. And delighted that you could join us today. Ways to engage. The chat is the primary way, although in this one, I'm hoping that people will raise their hands, and then Andrew will unmute you. You'll be able to talk, because I want you to be able to tell us how we did and how we're doing and what we should do going forward. So, hi, Lawan, nice to see you. So let's move to the next one, the agreements. Speak from your own experience, treat other people the way you want to be treated, and be here with us now. If you agree to these agreements, please just put I agree in the chat like Luan did, and everybody's putting it to all panelists and attendees, so that's fabulous. Okay. Hi, Michelle. Great to see you. So we're going to do our year in review. March 2020, I remember, was like March 14th when Be Strong Families decided, okay, we're not going into the office anymore. We're going to go virtual. And my most significant impression of what was going on at that time, which was we didn't really know much. If you look back to March 2020, March 14th, you know, we knew that there was this pandemic, but we'd never lived through a pandemic before. We didn't know what pandemic meant, right? There was this disease called COVID-19 that was ravaging China, Wuhan, China, and it came to Seattle, and there was just a lot of uncertainty. And I remember the feeling that I had at that time. This is a picture of entropy. And I've probably said this before on this webinar series, like my feeling was like things were just scattering. The danger was that things were like going outward, and people were spinning out. And you've been able to see that over the past year also. Like there have been a lot of people kind of spinning out, and it was very difficult because there was so much uncertainty. There was fear, like this thing, you know, I remember I was terrified. I told you all I was terrified, right? Like that I was sure if I got this thing, I was going to die, you know, because of the way it was a respiratory disease. If you're overweight, you're at higher risk. You know, there were all these risk factors that I had. So March 2020, next slide, Andrew. So as the CEO of Be Strong Families, it was incumbent upon me not only to get myself together, but also to figure out what Be Strong Families should do. And those of you before last March, it's kind of hard to believe, before last March, everything that we did, 100% of our services were in-person training and technical assistance. We traveled and all of us traveled, and we traveled a lot, and we went all over the place, and we taught people how to do cafes, and we taught about building better relationships with the families you serve. And it was all in person, and we were completely dedicated to it being in person, because we were like, there's too much, people need to stop being on their phones. They need to stop being on their devices. They need to be with each other. They need to break bread. They need to actually learn to talk to each other again. So that we were very adamant about that. And then COVID hit, and it was like, okay, that's not going to work. If we do that, we're like completely stopped. We're dead in the water. And it was also that all the people who were doing cafes were in the same boat that we were in, which is they were doing in-person cafes. So it was kind of like, are they going to just stop doing cafes until the pandemic ends? And we don't know when that's going to be, or should we figure something out? So obviously we decided to figure something out, and we pivoted immediately. Like March 15th, I got together with our team, and I said, we're going to have to take all of our training online. And initially our trainers were like, we don't do online training. Like, what's that going to be like? We had to create all the curricula to be okay online. We had to talk to all of our clients and see if they were okay online. Wow. And we also, it was very clear to me, like I also, as the leader here, had to do something to assist with the stress, confusion, emotional distress for staff and for everybody that we were in touch with, clients, their clients. Like, what could we do as Be Strong Families to be able to assist with keeping people strong? And I just don't want to underplay or underemphasize the amount of confusion and stress and emotional distress that everyone was feeling, because, you know, all of our trainers here were also in the space of, we do things in person, we don't do things online. Can I do it? You know, am I going to have a job? Like, what's going to happen? So I guess I'm feeling like I've been talking for a little while, so I want to go to the chat and see if this resonates, if you all remember this time, and if you were feeling some of these same things at the very beginning. So anybody who wants to raise their hand, or anybody who wants to put in the chat what you were feeling at the beginning of COVID. Next slide, Andrew. And I'll keep talking while you do that. But what we decided was also, and we had no funding for this, we had no foundation funding, we didn't have anybody telling us that this is what we should do, but it was kind of like, I thought, okay, because of this entropy thing, we need to like have a place in the middle of the day that's like a magnet. And initially it was for staff also, for staff and for the community. Like, we just need to hold space, and we need to be here in the middle of the day for people to talk and to share and to process and to learn together and to stay strong for ourselves and our children. So that's the name of the webinar series, right? It's Staying Strong for Ourselves and Our Children. Is that my correct there? Strong and positive for ourselves and our children, because it was very easy to go negative. And, you know, just speaking of negativity and COVID, I don't know if anybody saw the New York Times article today. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about it later in the week when I do my webinar on leading through difficult times. And some of this I'll probably repeat, but there was a study done by a guy at Dartmouth who thought, you know what, I think like our media coverage of COVID in the US is really negative. And so he decided to compare our media coverage in the US of COVID with media coverage all over the world. And he found out that, yes, 70% of our stories on COVID are what could be classified as negative. And in most other places, it was like 50-50. So that meant that every time something positive happens, like if things go down, if the rate goes down or the vaccine is coming, instead of our news carrying positive, you know, wow, there's now, you know, uptake of the vaccine at this or whatever, we still find something negative to talk about, the 21 states where it's increasing or whatever. And I think that that's really telling, because negativity and the addiction to negativity and the appetite for negativity is really, yes, it's the bad news bias article, Andrew, exactly. So you can drop it in the chat. So that bad news bias, that we have a bad news bias in this country, and that is kind of our addiction to negativity. And so we wanted to stay strong during whatever was happening, and we wanted to stay positive. And we wanted to do this because we knew that it would be good for ourselves and also our children. How are we going to stay there? We're Be Strong families. So as parents, as leaders of our families, how are we going to stay strong and positive for ourselves and our children? So we just decided, we're going to do a webinar series. And we decided to do it in English and Spanish at the same time. So they're two different webinar series, but we are committed to being, bilingual. So we started two webinar series, and we did them daily. And we did them daily because, again, it was about being here, being a magnet, being a place where people could go and just reliably connect. And you might remember, those of you who have been with us since the beginning, that we led the first 6 weeks of webinars ourselves, Be Strong Family staff. We did in English, we did 2 weeks of living the protective factors, a protective factor a day. Then we did 2 weeks of vitality, a domain a day. And then we did emerging issues and challenging topics related to navigating the pandemic that people weren't yet talking enough about. So we were, right there in the first month, we were talking about safety at home and feeling safe at home and all the reasons that you might not feel safe and what you did about it. So that was about domestic violence, it was about child abuse, and it was also about differing standards of PPE, of protection, and what people were doing when they lived with essential workers and how they were managing that. So we just always wanted it to be interactive, not like us being the experts and telling people what to do, but offering information and being interactive and figuring things out together. So let me see if there's anything in the chat. Tammy says a lot of fear of the virus, of job security, of the unknown. And thank you. We were a godsend with the webinars. Yeah. And then, yeah, Andrew dropped the article in the chat, but I think that's the wrong article, Andrew. Oh, no, it's the New York Times. Okay, good. All right. So we did the first 6 weeks. And after that, I began reaching out like this. I'm the CEO, right? So everybody else got back to work, training and doing their other things. And I became like Ms. Talk Show host, more or less. And I began reaching out to my friends and people I knew, colleagues that I thought would do great webinars that I thought you all would be interested in, that had something to share. We reached out to our board members. We reached out to just people in our kind of sphere that we thought would have good ability to be able to give something to this series. And we were overwhelmed by the generosity and the wisdom and the kindness of the response, because we did have a lot of people just, being willing to be here with us. And we held that space for the community to get together. And then what we did going forward, next slide, Andrew, I think, is that we just amped it up. So we started thinking, well, there are probably a lot of people coming to these webinars that have things that they'd like to share. So we did an invitation to people to be able to volunteer to do a webinar. And there was great uptake for that too. And you all remember, some people did their first webinar, their first webinar ever. They practiced with us, and you all were so kind and generous as supporters and audience, of being a supportive audience. And so that was, and then we also, people became friends through this webinar series. And we hired one of the super fans, and Lori Sanchez, who came here every day, and she also she helped design or do the whole back to school webinar series for the Spanish webinar, and she's now working with us. And we also we understand that some of you have made connections through the webinars, and people have been inspired to host their own shows. They're getting we're getting a lot of feedback. We've gotten a lot of feedback over the past year about the people getting help that they needed, getting crucial help that they needed. And we started being also very intentional about the diversity of the presenters and the topics. And honestly, this has a lot to do with me and keeping me interested and keeping me wanting to show up every day. So a lot of the content, like where we're pushing the envelope on the decolonization and race and equity issues, like we're really trying to learn the things that I'm trying to learn about. I've like put out there as webinar series. Also, a lot of the spiritual content is because I'm very interested in that. So I kind of am using myself as as a barometer. It's not always the best barometer, because I know when we started finding out like a little bit more about who you are, in terms of 75% of the people who come here work with families, providing services to families. So then I started thinking much more about family support and trying to give you all things, to resources that you could use professionally for your jobs, and you might not have time to go look at the Child Welfare Information Gateway every day. So doing tours, or getting Brazelton to do a tour of what they do for you to help you with your work. Samantha says this has been the best experience, as well as the support provided from tech support. Oh, she was nervous. Samantha's a presenter of ours. I was nervous when I did the first one, and now I'm so honored. Very nice. And I think I missed Esther saying I was very concerned with everything that COVID-19 produced and continues happening. Yep, there's a lot of, I didn't say that, but there's a lot of like persistent anxiety as well as the grief, right? And Luan says the information received in the webinars are useful with engaging the families I work with. That's perfect. That's great, because that's what we wanted. We wanted to be, and we realized people are coming and it's like a twofer. Like you get something for yourself, and then you get something to be able to share with the families that you work with. And that's also why we committed to having things be available afterwards, now on YouTube, before on our website, and also like having the handouts be available, like the PowerPoints be available for you all to share with the people that you work with, because this is really about being helpful to you. So we also did some series within the series. So you might remember Ahmad Abadjurde and Yoli Maya, Judith Erwin Shapiro, Ruben Mabubi. These are people who've done like 5 or 6 webinars on a given topic. And we have had, Tunja Otis. Also, how could I forget Tunja? She's done some fantastic webinars here. And what's interesting is the way that the evolution of the different webinar series, like the English series, I've been describing my experience with the English series, but just really interestingly, the Spanish series has evolved really a little bit differently. Like with the Spanish series, Sarah Gonzalez, my colleague, is the moderator, the host for that. And she has about 10 or 12 regular presenters that have just kind of have a lot of content, and they're not in this country. Most of them are in Mexico or Guatemala, and they're doing these webinars out of the goodness of their hearts, but they're continuing. Like it's the same 10 or 12 people doing all the webinars. Now with the English, we have many more presenters. And I think I also want to say that we're intentional about trying to grow the community. We're launching a new website before the end of the fiscal year, which for us is the end of June. So what we're hoping to do is have a speakers teachers bureau on it that represents that everybody who's done a webinar is invited to be part of, so that people can see the community, the diversity of the community, the diversity of presenters, the diversity of topics, because part of our agenda is always, how do I say this, disrupt and co-create. So the idea is we don't always need experts to come in and teach things. We need to figure stuff out together. And we are the experts. We are who we're waiting for. So that's happening. Yes, and Tammy says she appreciates the learning from others sharing in the chat. Right. And that's the point, is that we learn together and we grow together, and none of us has all the answers, but we can, I mean, what Be Strong Family specializes in is opening up the conversation. We're going to have one of those, some of my friends have said, don't do that. But we have one that Alex and I are holding space for a conversation on, when is it race and when is it something else? And that's kind of a hard conversation to have. And where nobody has the answer to that, but we think it's important to talk about, you know, we think it's important to talk about and see what we think about it and what, and how we navigate that. So we try to be fearless and dive in where others fear to tread and have the conversations that need to be had. So let's go to the next slide, Andrew. And I don't know, we are gratified that you seem to like it, because these are some of the, this is some of the feedback that we've gotten. You can read them yourselves, but this is some of the love and the feedback that we've gotten as we've been doing these. We also are going to be coming out with a hashtag Amplify perennial calendar later in the year, which has, you might remember that I had been saying, okay, so from this webinar, what would you like to amplify? What needs to, and all of those things that you all put in the chat are going into a daily perennial calendar. Like today I will amplify good communication, or today I will amplify love, peace, harmony. So anybody want to say anything about so far about, or anybody have questions or comments? Tracy says, Be Strong Families webinars have made me much stronger. Oh, wow. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful to you all. I was introduced to Be Strong after completion of the Parent Katthe training, and one of the best trainings of my life, because I was introduced to the Be Strong family, and now the chat family. Yes, awesome. And we love having you, Tracy. I mean, I say this, and it's not a, I don't say it lightly. Like, I really do see your names, and I feel like we're friends, and we have never met each other. I've never seen you, but yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So let's go to the next slide. So when we're creating our new website, we're trying to, you know, like, obviously a year's worth of English and Spanish webinars is a lot of content, and it's, the way it's organized on our website right now chronologically isn't very helpful to if you're trying to search for something, or if you want something, it's not easy necessarily to find. So we, Andrew and Dee, had been going through to try to figure out, okay, so what are the categories of things that we've talked about over this past year? And I think that this is interesting. We've talked about COVID, and we've talked about, you're welcome, Tracy. We've talked about lots of things to do with COVID, like navigating, how to navigate the pandemic, and what to do, kids during COVID, and, you know, all kinds of, like, education during COVID. We talked about COVID. We talked about vaccination. You know, we had a webinar on the vaccine, kind of like answering questions. My sister is a nurse who did that one. Education is another big, the working at home and educating kids, remote learning, and how could the education system change as a result of this pandemic? What are we learning? A lot of family support and child abuse prevention, how-tos and resources, professional development. And then we did a lot of things that we would group under vitality, but this is like self-care and domains of vitality, health and well-being, all those things that trying to staying strong and positive. How do we stay emotionally, spiritually, mentally strong? So that vitality. We have had a big, I mean, parent engagement is a big theme for Be Strong Families. And as I said, part of our strategic plan is disrupt and co-create. And we're always about engaging the people who are being served in the creation of the materials that are serving them. So how to engage parents, how to promote parent engagement, how to authentically engage and sustain engagement has been another theme. And then a huge theme, as I was talking about earlier, is anti-racism, decolonization, social justice. And very interested in the nexus between social justice and parenting. And this is our More Perfect Union cafes do this, is like, how do we as parents deal with a landscape of inequality, and how do we help our children deal with that? Or how do we assist our children? If you were at yesterday's webinar, how do we assist our children with dealing with inequality? Let's see. Esther says, as a worker with Spanish-speaking families, I'm so happy to have information on their language for any issue that they need help with. Yeah, so Esther, that there's a whole Spanish webinar series, and I'm sure there's incredible information there. And Andrew says his first webinar that was about the decolonization of well-being. And that was such an informative and eye-opening webinar to attend. For those of you who didn't, that was Ahmad Abadurade's series. And that was because what that means, decolonization of well-being, is that oftentimes when we speak about health, mental, physical health, we speak about it as if it's the individual is the person with the problem and needs to get better, right? So the individual, and that's logical, right? If I have a disease, like, I have to get better. I have to figure out what to do to make myself healthy. But the decolonization angle on that is that sometimes if the society, if the environment, if the community is not a healthy community, then actually you being healthy is not, doesn't conform to community standards. So it's like when the container is unfair or colonial or racist, that creates problems for people, and that we have to address those issues in order for people to be able to be well. You know, we can't just put it on the individual as if the society has nothing to do with it. Tammy says the Vitality series was my favorite. All of the self-care webinars have been so helpful. They really help me remember that if I want to keep doing my job well, I need to care for my own mental health and keep refreshing or sharpening my axe. Great. So Tammy, you're going to love where we're going. I'm just like, there's a teaser. Another theme that I think is really important and that I want to be able to do more of is sustainability, because I think that oftentimes environmentalists and the well-being of the planet is separated from our family support field, and they need to be connected. And when we think about the whole sustainability conversation, which we had with Terry Gibbs and Lori Malbach, there's a bridge, because what we're really talking about when we do family support or family services is we want the families that we work with to be able to be sustainable, right? And so all the same things that make them sustainable are refracted out to other sustainability issues. And then we have an intimate connection. If our society or our community is not sustainable, if our environment is not sustainable, then it's very difficult for families to be sustainable or children to be sustainable. And then the other theme that we've covered is leadership, because at Be Strong Families, we define leadership as motivating or inspiring ourselves or others to action. So we know that every parent is a leader. And every person is a leader because you motivate yourself to action every day. You get up, you do what you need to do. You get your kids up, you get them doing what they need to do. That's leadership. And you don't have to lead from the front all the time. You can also lead from behind. So leadership is another theme that we've covered. So it's been a very rich range of topics. And we were kind of, Andrew, do you want to say anything about putting together this, when you were looking at the themes? Is there anything that, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but is there anything you want to say about what you realized as you were grouping them?
I think the biggest thing for me was just seeing sorry, this is on the spot, but I appreciate the question. I appreciated seeing how COVID ranged in conversation. Like, was COVID the central point of the webinar, or was COVID kind of like a catalyst for something more? So like the school reform, how can we change it with COVID, as opposed to something like getting through the holidays, the Corona coaster. So that was really interesting to see.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's important too, Andrew, because since the beginning of COVID, and I know this is controversial and many of you may not agree with me, but some of you probably will. I've looked at COVID as being a gift. And partly that's my stance. My spiritual stance is to look at everything as a gift and a challenge or an opportunity to be able to figure out, like, how is this going to improve the situation? So while on the one hand, COVID is terrible and it's been devastating, on the other hand, some very positive things have come out of COVID. We did one webinar that was on survivor's guilt, because a lot of people, there are people doing well. And some of you have been doing well during COVID. Like some of you, I know we were talking about environmental vitality. Some of you have done a lot of home improvement. I moved. I got a car like during COVID because the rates were so good. So it's not fair how, disproportionately affected people have been. But some of the things that have come out, like the less stress on the environment, the pollution going down, some of the things have been positive. And so we always tried to take it as, okay, so what can COVID teach us about what needs to happen after COVID? Even like think about wearing masks. And I know that there's a lot of controversy about wearing masks, and there's a lot of people don't want to do it. And I'm very tired of wearing a mask. And I'm noticing after I got vaccinated, and I'm like, I'm not going to die. It's harder for me to remember to wear a mask. The mask is more annoying. And I look at that and I think that's my selfishness. That's my issue that I need to work on, because it's still dangerous for people. And I also think culturally, in some countries, in Asian countries, after SARS a few years ago, I would often see people before COVID on airplanes, Asian people on airplanes with those masks, with masks on. And I thought, that's weird. But actually, when you think about it, it's very considerate. They know that they're not feeling well. They don't want to give you their germs. That's a very considerate thing to be doing, So I guess I'm not being a Pollyanna and saying, oh, COVID's wonderful, but I am saying that we've tried in our coverage of COVID to balance the grappling with the grief and the loss and the fear and the anxiety and the negativity with noticing the positive changes that have happened. I mean, one positive change for me, I've been having for the last year, I might cry when I say this. For the last year, we've been having a weekly call, my mom and my two sisters and me, and a weekly FaceTime. And we could have done that before COVID. There was nothing stopping us, but we didn't. During COVID, we started. And partly it was because we couldn't go visit my mom as much. And we knew she was very lonely and my dad was very sick. And you all know that he passed away in November of COVID. But you know, so we were trying to be there for her. But the relationships in my family have gotten closer, you know, as a result of COVID. So I would ask you all, if you feel like putting it in the chat, just to like share some things that have happened that are in the past year that happened because of COVID, or indirectly or directly, that have been positive in your life, while I continue talking. Next slide, Andrew. So, as I said, we had no money to do this. And it's a huge amount of my time that went into this. I know you're all thinking about the positive things that have happened in your families during COVID, and you're going to start writing in the chat soon. But we did our first ever annual campaign, and we called it Show Your Love. And we did raise nearly $28,000 over 2 months to keep the webinar series going. So that was another like little milestone for us. Next slide. So this is some interesting stats. 34,000 total webinar registrations, 25,850 English, and 8,000 Spanish. We made 3,400 plus new friends from webinar registrants. What that means is that we added people to our database as a result of the webinar that weren't there before. So that's a lot of new friends. And throughout the year, we had on average 148 daily registrants. It's combining the English and Spanish, with the highest months in May 2020, you know, that was 2 months after it started. And, you know, we averaged 224 daily registrants. So, and all that is based on 3/23/21 to 3/22/20. Andrew's had virtual happy hours with his grandma, who lives in Kansas City. And connecting with her on so many different topics meant the world to me. It's created more empathy and community help, Esther says. I've enjoyed the opportunity to work from home, Tammy says. Not having to commute and not only saved me money, but gave me 2 extra hours per day to spend with my family. Yeah, and that's also, it enabled me to move to this like more, it's like ex-urban location, which is kind of suburban, but on the border of rural. And it's far away from Pilsen, where Be Strong Family's office was. I mean, we gave up one of our offices, and we have a tiny office still. So we just like went completely virtual and surrendered to it, you know. And people were nervous. Some people were nervous about working from home, but in general, we've thrived. Let's go to the next slide. So now we're moving into year 2 of webinars. And I want to say, like at Be Strong Families, when we started these webinars, I was asked, especially by the tech people, because it's a lot, you know, what we tried to do for our guest presenters is make sure that they were really well supported. So I'm here as the host to kind of keep the conversation going and to support them. And then Andrew or Dee or Jahira or Lori or Selena. Am I missing anyone? Andrew? Or Paul? Yes, Paul. How could I forget Paul? Have handled the tech side. And so we did that because we wanted everybody who was doing a webinar to be able to relax and feel supported around the tech stuff and have it run as smoothly as possible. But as you can imagine, it's a huge time commitment for people that wasn't written into their job description initially, you know? So they were all asking, and me, well, when are we going to stop this? Or when are we going to go to less frequent? And my answer has always been, I don't know. We'll know when we know, you know? So let's see, Samantha's has said she's continued her advocacy journey and become a CASA Youth Prepared Leader for Red Cross Georgia, as well as Georgia Parent Advisory Council Region 7. She started building capacity and shedding light on food equity. Yes, and serving as a food corps service member. My son and I were able to meal prep with the school system and then ride the bus to pass out meals daily on the school bus. My daughter and I began serving at a local clothing closet at the Dream Center. So COVID allowed me to help my community and serve with my family despite job loss. Wow. That's deep. It's beautiful, Samantha. It's really beautiful. I love the idea of, life as a journey and life as an adventure, and whatever happens, propelling us, navigating, kind of like moving, dancing with what's happening and finding the joy in wherever we are. I mean, I would say that I'm just speaking from personal experience, and people, you're welcome to raise your hand or put in the chat and speak from your own personal experience. But even my father's passing was a blessing, in the sense that our relationship, I learned more about him in the months and the months up until his death and after his death, and grew my love for him and my appreciation for him grew exponentially in that time. And everybody, I mean, I'm not saying it was great to lose him. It's not great to lose him, but there were really beautiful things that happened in that part of the journey, his journey and my journey. Really lovely, touching moments. And I feel like those sweet moments are like pearls on the string. They're like, I don't have a great metaphor, but there's joy and there's beauty and there's love, in the middle of situations that aren't ones that you would ask for. Can I get an aho? Okay, moving into year 2. So, yeah, next slide, Andrew. So Tammy, this is what I was saying, you're gonna love it. So we have decided to switch it up a little bit in April and May, because we are feeling, just looking at the attendance of the webinars and looking at just the exhaustion that everybody's feeling around Zoom and around, other people are doing webinars. There's a lot of webinars going on out there. And what we are thinking at Be Strong Families is, we still want to have this midday, gathering point, but we want to kind of have a community vitality push, a vitality journey that we'll all kind of take together, but each of us taking our own journey. And starting on April 6th, we're going to spend 8 weeks clearing out the clutter of a long winter and jump-starting holistic vitality. And we're going to start with the week, the launch week, and then we're going to go to each domain of vitality, and then we'll have a week, and then we're going to go, the last week will be holistic vitality. And we're thinking of it like, the word that comes to mind is boot camp, but it's not really boot camp. But you know how boot camps at like gyms or whatever, they're like places where you sign up and you commit and you say, I really care about my wellness and my health, and I'm going to make a concerted effort to be healthy and to make healthier habits and to just enhance my vitality. That's what we're hoping that you all will do with us in April and May, is that you'll make a commitment to yourself to boosting your own vitality, your holistic vitality, your environmental, financial, mental, physical, social, spiritual vitality, that you'll make a commitment to that, and that we can support each other midday. But we're going to have these webinars be like mostly 30-minute check-ins with an aspect that's like a micro training. So it'll be like a topic that's related to that domain of vitality, but maybe a little bit of information, but mostly also just sharing and connecting and, kind of like being here accountable to each other just to know that we're in a passive way, like not like anybody has to like weigh in or anything, but just that in a passive way, you'll show up and all of us will be showing up and we'll know that's because we're on this vitality journey together. So we're going to have many fewer guest presenters. We're going to have BSF staff hosting it. And again, I know we may lose a bunch of people. Because sometimes, I mean, I don't know how many people are going to want to, use this forum to be committed to their own vitality. We will have occasional guest presenters and they may do a 60-minute thing. I know Ruby, who was on yesterday, is going to do one on race and culture insecurity in modern times during the Spiritual Vitality Week. And I know Tracy Kirchman during Spiritual Vitality is going to do something on art for everyone. And we are like we will entertain occasional guest presenters, but it's mostly just going to be like that community meeting. And then on Fridays, we're going to have a weekly Vitality Cafe. And we haven't figured out exactly how to do that, but we're going to have, we will have, I think, breakout rooms so that we'll be able to have a weekly Vitality Cafe. So you can come to every day, or you can come to, Mondays and Fridays or Wednesdays and Fridays just to check in. And then, you can also, these cafes, there'll be 8 cafes. So that's another way of getting new ideas and just, encouraging yourself and intensifying your commitment to your own vitality journey. Because doesn't it feel right now like out in the world, as the vaccine gets more prevalent and as COVID seems to be dissipating, it feels like collectively we're going to need to boost our wellness. Like I know, again, speaking for myself, I know people at Be Strong Families who got way healthier as a result of COVID than before COVID. Okay. I know people who are at their lowest weight. I know people who started exercise routines, and that's fantastic. I also know there's a lot of people like me who sat on their butt most of the day, working from home. And again, especially because like in November, I had a series of really tragic losses, I just became kind of like stationary. And so I'm looking at springtime as a time to get off my butt and to start, really, go with the energy of spring and get holistically healthy and really commit to it, work on it, and live those vitality domains. So yes, we'll get to see each other, and I'm on the opposite end also. And I feel like, so I guess I'm gonna ask you guys. We can't do a poll because I didn't think of it before now, but I'm gonna ask you in the chat, like maybe 10 being I'm totally there, and 1 being okay, I'll see you in June. I'm going to skip April and May. How excited are you about going on a collective vitality journey, or like supporting each other in your vitality journeys? Keep it coming. Give me your numbers. We got an 11, we got a 10, we got a 9, we got an 8, we got a 10. Awesome. Well, those 1s or 2s, it's okay. It's okay. And maybe you'll see a guest presenter, or maybe you'll see a talk, because there's going to be a lot of self-care, and maybe there'll be a cafe that you want to go to. So even if you're not like all in for, I'm ready to do this vitality journey, there still will be content that will be interesting. And we're still going to be here every day at lunchtime, holding space, ready to receive you if you need a little love, So let's go to the next slide. So that's our plan for April and May, but we really also wanted to open it up to you, because we figure that because you showed up today on our anniversary day, you may have gone to a number of webinars, and we want to know What do you want going forward? Because we need to plan June and the future. So what do you want going forward? And when should we stop? Do you think like we should go to once a week? Do you think we should, um, you know, do you think it's still good to have a daily webinar, or do you think it's like not so needed? And what kinds of topics are the most valuable for you? Give us your input. Jennifer says she likes daily webinars. Cool. Yeah, and Andrew's telling you feel free to raise your hands and he can unmute you. Tammy doesn't ever want to stop. Not sure how we'll fit in when we're no longer working from home. She prioritizes this time daily. I only miss if I have to attend another training or if I'm hosting a cafe. Wow, that's great. Once a week is a good idea because it allows time for our weekly visits. Yeah, if we have them daily, you can come once a week. Well, I guess, I mean, you all didn't know I was going to be asking this. So I just like you to think on it. And my email is Katthe at bestrongfamilies.net. Michelle says she enjoys the daily webinars. I think that any information regarding working with families is good, including other participants' input. Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. And as you think about this, if you think of some topics that aren't being, I mean, because there's a lot of webinars out there, there's a lot of information out there, and we don't want to be duplicating. We want to be helping, assisting, providing, supporting with angles or information that is not how you can't just get everywhere else. Because, there are frankly things that other people do way better than us. We're not Harvard, so we're not the research-based, experts on things necessarily. So we want to be doing what people need, what you need that you're not able to get anywhere else. So I guess I would ask you also, what is it about these webinars, besides that we're here, and I'm hearing the chat and the input from participants and the ability to be able to contribute and to hear what other people's expertise is and to get ideas. Like I'm getting all that from what you're saying. What is it about these webinars that you have valued? Sense of community and that it's a safe space. Thank you, Tammy. Andrew says he appreciates the authenticity and sense of closeness, the feeling of a journey we're all taking together. Michelle says she lives in a rural county, and I think it's been helpful to hear about other areas. Nice. So I'll do it a different way also. Like, if you think back, you've attended multiple webinars, all of you. What's your favorite one, or what are ones that stand out for you that you remember, like, oh my gosh, I remember that one, it was great? Tammy says she feels she has something to learn from everyone. So even the webinars that weren't my favorite, I listen because I know they have valuable things to offer. Yeah, but what was your like highlight? Esther, it helps us learning new ways to provide services. Or you can think of a presenter. Maybe it's not like any. Andrew resonated with Judith Urban Shapiro on a corrective perspectives on empowerment after trauma. I actually found Be Strong Families during the areas of vitality webinars. Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm glad vitality is a topic that's of interest because that is where we're going. And let's go to the next slide because we're wrapping up here. Just thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you for participating and thank you for celebrating with us and listening. And tomorrow, Nelson Gabriel's going to be back here, or we're going to be here with the webinar called Serving Through Uncharted Waters. And then I'm here on Friday doing a webinar on leading through difficult times, which is basically my experience and my biases about leadership and about effective leadership during challenging times and leading from the inside out. And then on Monday, Andrea Felder will be here. Practical tips for helping families with home management during and after a pandemic. And then Rick's going to be back. Our financial guy from Wintrust is going to be back with talking about borrowing basics. So it's just some basic information on finances. Don't forget to wear your mask. And we still have some masks at Be Strong Families. If you want to go on and order one, that would support us and we will be grateful and you will be able to express your values. They're pretty and they're comfortable. And let me see, somebody said, Tammy said, oh, vitality. Callahan technique. Okay. So I would change this up to say, if you think of anything related to the webinars that you'd like to see going forward, like maybe even, after April and May, like in June, July, August, if you want to give us some, or if you would like to do a webinar, or if you'd like to do a series, just get in touch with me. I'm completely open and we aim to please, and I want to do things that are valuable for you all. So please hit me up. And thank you for attending today. Thank you. You're welcome, Chastity, and thank you for thanking us. And thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Tammy.